Hi and welcome to this short video about back into a brief. What is a brief? A brief is a document that contains instructions on how to complete a task or an assignment. It is also sometimes referred to as a contract between two parties, the employer and the employee, or the company and the client. Types of brief. There is a negotiated brief, where the client and employer will come to a specified agreement upon the project's brief. There is also a contractual brief, which is a legal document created between an employee and a client. There is also a tender brief, where the client will advertise that they require a media product to be made, and a potential employer initiates a brief, budget, and a proposal which is then pitched to the client. An informal brief is where the outlines of the project are discussed. A commission brief is when a large company employs an independent, smaller company to create their product or project for them. A formal brief is a document that includes only detailed information that is relevant to what the client wants the company to achieve. A competition brief is created in order to be accessible to all production companies that are participating in creating a project or product. A cooperative brief is when several production companies are employed to work on a set brief which they must work together in order to complete. Here are some pros and cons about each brief. A good thing about a contractual brief is that it gives the company an idea of what the client wants them to achieve. However, a bad thing about it is that the client may want a lot of work from the employer. A good thing about a formal brief is that the brief itself is clear and short. A bad thing about it is that the employer and the client may disagree on things. A good thing about the informal brief is that there is no real guidelines to the brief, allowing the employer to influence their own opinions into the brief before the client has finalised it. The bad thing about it, though, is that the client's expectations may clash with the employer's character. The task may be too much for the employer to handle. A good thing about a cooperative brief is that it builds a sense of community within the workplace, as well as there being many different ideas. A bad thing about it, though, is that different members in the team may disagree with each other, which will halt progress. A good thing about a negotiated brief is that it brings ideas of both client and the employer together, creating a brief that tailors to both of them. A bad thing about this, though, is that the employer and client may argue over negotiations, resulting in employers' loss of work. A good thing about a commission brief is that the independent production company will be paid for making the product and could receive part of the profit generated by the product's company. Bad thing about it, though, is that the independent production company may be undercharged and not receive enough credit for their work. A good thing about a tender brief is more competition. It makes the possible employer create a better proposal in the hope of securing them the work from the client. A bad thing about it, though, is that the employer who loses is likely to feel disheartened because they didn't win the work from the client. A competition brief, a good thing about it is that heavy competition encourages the employer to polish their pitch and final product, making it better. A bad thing about it, though, is that there are sometimes hidden charges, with the winner having to pay a fee for being crowned victorious. Now we're going to look at some examples of briefs. First up, we have a brief from Barclays. Just find the full brief. Okay, so Barclays have given you this brief called 5 Million Young Futures. And the brief is to make it famous. It says, what is 5 Million Futures? And it goes into detail saying how it's a scheme that Barclays is made in order to help young people fulfill the skills that they need. It goes on about how you use it. There's also more links. It goes on about how you can make something famous as well. So, you know, keep your ideas simple, make it rememberable. The key is 5 million, so focus on that, as well as some examples as well. So, Movember, which is a month-long event involving men growing moustaches during the month of November to create an awareness of prostate cancer. So you could use posters like the Barack Obama Hope poster, which was designed by artist Shepard Fairey, which was widely described as iconic, and came to represent the 2008 Obama presidential campaign. Our, inspiration, so Dumb Ways to Die, is an infectious, happy and colourful video showing you stupid ways to die. It has over 65 million views on YouTube, and it's been shared millions of times throughout social media. It also says what they're not looking for. So your idea should celebrate the work of 5 million young futures. Your idea shouldn't dwell on the negative and make people feel guilty. Instead, it should make people aware of the good 5 million futures does. So what you could do, you could make an ad, do a commentary, a film, even try and organise an event, make a website or an app, or even get up on social media. Now, this brief is an example of competition because it is in fact a live competition, and you could win Barclays could in fact end up using your video or whatever it is you did to campaign 5 million young futures. It is also a tender brief, as well as we were told to do this in groups of 3 or 4, so it also counts as a cooperative brief. So that is that one. Here we also have, get this up, another example of a brief, which is from photography, a pinhole brief. It goes on about what is line and form, as well as a practical guide. So it gives you good information here, which is an example of a formal brief. And then further down here we have workbook submission, so it tells you clearly in bullet pointed what you need to do. So that would be, write up notes and diagrams on pinhole photography, research some photographers, also create your own pinhole images, compare them to that of the work of the photographers you researched, as well as write an evaluation. And down the bottom there, it also says when it's due in. As I said earlier, this to me is a form of a formal brief. And here we have another brief. Quite a big brief as well if you look at it, quite big. 2 pages, that's half. This is an example of a cooperative brief. This is clearly stated, and it says here you will be split into 3 groups. Each group will have a different focus. And it says here, so down the bottom you have what group 1 will be doing, which is context of Greek tragedy, as well as, creating a presentation on where did Greek tragedy originate even, what is the Dionysus festival. And then we have group 2, which is convections of Greek tragedy. So what did the theatre look like, how the staging might have been relevant to what was going on stage, the equipment they might have used. And finally down here we have what group 3 would be doing, which is the playwrights, Psychophiles and Euripides. The group will be researching and preparing information on the 2 playwrights which they will be studying. So it actually links back to what you would be doing in class before being given this assignment. So it says, in fact it says down here, your project is Greek theatre actors. So, you've also got to create 2 masks as well. So that is our 3rd brief, which is an example of formal and cooperative. To check that you've all been paying attention, there is in fact a quiz. It's only short, 5 questions. The answers are on the last slide. If I'm going too fast with questions, feel free to pause the video and try and figure it out. Okay, so question 1. How many types of brief are there? That was the second slide we went through, the diagram saying how many types of brief are there. Question 2. Name a pro about an informal brief. 3. Name a con about a competition brief. 4. Name a difference between a contractual and a cooperative brief. And then finally 5. What categories of brief does the Barclays 5 Million Young Futures brief fit into? Okay. Answers. So, answer for question 1, how many types of brief was there? There was 8. Number 2, there were no real guidelines. Employers can add their own opinions to the brief. You could have either one of those 2. Number 3, there are possible hidden charges. 4, it was part of a contractual, which is a legal document made by employer and client. A cooperative, teams working together, the brief is set. You could have any of those there. You could either just write it is a contractual brief, or it's a cooperative brief, or you could just write down made by employer and client, or the brief is set already. And then 5, it was part of a competition, tender and cooperative. And in the words of Porky Pig, that's all folks. Thanks so much for watching.